For good or bad, crit is a stat that some people hate or love. There kind of seems like there isn't always an in-between, even though there does seem like there are certain points in the game where people tend to hate it less than other times, especially when like crit marksmen are weak and when Yasuo is weak especially. People don't seem to hate crit so much, but once those champions become meta, or once people felt like an engagement was too unpredictable because of crit, that's when the crit hate starts to come in. One of the solutions, of course, is to not make crit random and make crit be like, hey, if you have 20% crit chance, every 1 in 5 attacks will be a crit and the other 4 will not be. But rioters and people from Riot Games I've mentioned in the past, they don't necessarily like that idea or concept because they do like the unpredictability of crit by making it RNG, by making it so you take an engagement and you don't know if you're going to win or lose because crit might become a factor. Some players absolutely don't like that. They work with this game trying to understand the math of this game so they can try and predict engagements and be able to know exactly how a fight's going to go so they can eliminate the risk of the engagement. For example, if you're going against a tank, you expect that tank who has no damage items to be weak to your lifesteal and armor penetration. And then it turns out that tank has a bunch of bursts and then kills you as if you were a ward. As a matter of fact, it might take a tank longer to kill wards than it might take to kill your AD carry, which is designed to kill the tank. They're the DPS machine built with items to kill the tank, and they're like evenly matched, except the tank has like 4,000 health and your AD carry maybe has 1,500 at that point in time. So there's that. But beyond that, part of the understanding the math of this game is being able to know, hey, I'm going to do this much damage, or my opponents are building these certain items, so if I engage with them, they're going to do this kind of damage to me. They have, for example, especially maybe in high elo more so than anywhere else, a champion or player is going to know that a champion is going to do like 200 something damage because they scale like this, they're at this level, and they've built this item. So when they attack me, if I choose to engage and duel them, they'll be doing this much damage to me, and then I'll be doing this much damage back. And then I'll know who's going to win the engagement, so I know it's actually not risky to take this engagement. For example, when you see people flash on their tower for an auto attack, especially if they're like a ranged AD carry, well, there's a difference between, hey, they look low, so if I flash forward on their tower and auto attack, it might kill them, versus, okay, my auto attacks do 109 damage, they have 60 health left, even if you incorporate armor, it'll still kill them. So if I flash forward for this kill, it will kill them, there won't be risk because I'll take one auto attack, I'm in and I'm out. Versus on the flip side, in that first scenario, you flash in, auto attack, they don't die, and now you have to be like, do I stay for another auto attack and try and kill them, possibly taking a second and maybe even a third tower shot doing so, or do I let them get away, now knowing that they also got my flash for free because they're going to make it back to Fountain now. And some people will do the former, in which case they might get themselves killed if it's early enough in the game, tower aggro and shots do a bunch of damage, and then they're kind of just dead over it. I've kind of rambled on about the math of this game a bit too long, trying to give you guys a little bit of understanding and context about crit and things like that, understanding the math and being able to predict engagements, and why crit might actually play a factor and role and not making that be able to be a thing, because a crit will happen, and then you're like, oh, this engagement was supposed to go like this, and they happen to get like 3 crits in a row, and now I've died and cost my team something. So that's where I'm coming at when I'm coming with this idea to maybe smooth out the crit's power curve, right? If you make some sort of crit Rod of Ages item, it's not necessarily that this is the greatest idea. I'm making this idea specifically so that people can debate it, or if they agree with it, maybe elaborate in more better ways than I might be able to on my own. The idea being, maybe this item is something that with its components and how much gold it costs, you can't complete probably before 10 minutes anyway. And when you do, it only gives you like 5% crit chance per minute for about 20 minutes for 100%, so that you won't get to 100% crit chance until about 30 minutes, which is considered the beginning of the late game. In which case, maybe that would be a bit fair, because then you can have all the 100% crit, but you won't be able to have that kind of level of damage and whatever else you might have built in that time until post 30 minutes, kind of like Rod of Ages, how you don't really get the most of it until the 10 minutes have gone by and it's fully stacked. Now, one of the reasons I make this a thing is in terms to separate attack speed and crit. Like, is part of the problem with balancing crit, and when crit people feel like it's out of control, just the math, or the fact that it's usually crit and attack speed? So those 3 lucky crits in a row not only happen in a row, but they happen really fast because you've built a lot of crit and attack speed behind that crit. So now it's like, oh, this engagement went entirely like I didn't want it to go, or I planned out like it should have went, because they got 3 lucky crits and like 2 seconds. And if you separate crit items and attack speed items, would that help that out, or would that actually make it worse and make balance more of a nightmare if anything? Because now you have to balance, hey, AD carries now need to build attack speed items and crit items as 2 separate things of items. So let's say you eliminate Infinity Edge and you put this Rod of Ages item as a first item to build. Now you have attack speed boots in there as well. You have 4 slots left. You probably need to build pure attack speed out of at least 2 of those, slots now. And then you still probably will need to build like your Last Whisper or your Hex Drinker or your Bloodthirster. And then the 6th item could be maybe another defensive item of some sort if the game's going that badly. And on paper, maybe that actually doesn't sound bad, but maybe it does, right? Because it's designating 3 spots, unless you count boots, 4 slots, to just this scaling item and then a bunch of attack speed. Kind of similar to now in the triple crit build, you might be able to say, with Runon's Infinity Edge and like Rapid Fire Cannon with attack speed boots, but it just feels like maybe you get more out of it on live because A, those Zeal items are super cheaper than they were. Even Infinity Edge is cheaper than it was as well, and then the boots aren't super expensive, and it does feel like you might be able to do something with those 3 items versus this route where, let's say, Phantom Dancer, or let's say none of the Zeal items had crit on them, they just had the attack speed component, right? If you buy that one item and complete it at 10 minutes, like at 11 minutes, 12 minutes, you only have 10% crit chance, and now you're starting to try and buy the attack speed. And you're kind of at a little bit of a limbo, I guess, for lack of a better word, because with a Zeal item, right, you'll get just flat out 30% attack speed, but you'll also flat out get, 30% crit chance, depending on the crit, the Zeal item. In which case, behind the Infinity Edge, or at least the BF sword that you're building, you actually have maybe, somewhat damage, and then you have somewhat attack speed and somewhat crit, so you can kind of do something in the early game. You're not supposed to be good in the early game anyway, but you can do like something, right? You can duel maybe the enemy laner if they're not strong either, something, right? And this idea that I'm proposing, yeah, you'll eventually get the 100% crit just by letting this item be able to scale, but while you're waiting for it to scale, you're getting significantly less crit than you would be if you just had Zeal items the way they were. So I'm kind of playing devil's advocate, I guess, to my own idea, because I want to let people know this is like an open idea for debate. There are definitely cons of this idea that I'm proposing, and I'm more so putting this out there as a theorycraft idea to smooth out the curve of crit, to make it a bit more, I guess, mathematical, so that people can actually predict it a little bit more, not get, take away the RNG element completely, because that's, I guess, an identity of crit that they want to preserve, but be able for people to be like, hey, even if you crit 3 times in 2 minutes, you only are going to crit, 5% of the time, so most likely that can't happen, right? If you have an Infinity Edge or Runons by 20 minutes, you do have 50% crit chance, even if you don't have the most of damage behind it. If you have this item at 15 minutes, you might only have 25% crit chance, and depending on this, if this item should have damage in it or not, you're not really having any damage behind it, so even if you crit that often and that much in like 3 auto attacks in a few seconds, it might not be like any damage whatsoever at all, because it might not have the passive that Infinity Edge has that allows you to have the 250% damage instead of just a 200% damage from crits. And I guess that's the secondary question about this item. If this kind of item was supposed to exist, because maybe it did look like a good balanced idea, should it build out of a BF sword? Should it build out of some damage whatsoever, or should it just be like a stat stick for specifically crit, and you build damage out of other items, which then might lead back to the whole balanced nightmare of, oh, now you're building a stat stick that's just for crit, you're building attack speed items that are just for attack speed. Where's your damage coming from? Your base damages? Do you rework AD carries across the board and just give them higher base damages, in which case their items never give damage at all and only give them stats like crit and attack speed? Take someone like Jinx, for example, and instead of scaling, I think it's now 2.5 damage per level till level 18 for like a total of around 101 damage at level 18, you actually give her like 10 damage per level, because none of AD carry items anymore give any damage. They just give stats like crit or attack speed. And I'm not saying that this is a good idea. I'm just proposing that to give you more options to theorycraft or debate about or experiment with your own thoughts in the comment section down below, because that is all for me for this video. That's about the general consensus and putting together these ideas that I can as best as I can in a video of this length. So sorry you had to watch it for this far. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Specifically comment so we can have a conversation about if an item like this or like a rebalance around crit and the marksman role would even be a decent idea, would it be a horrible idea, would it be somewhere in between with its own pros and cons? What are your opinions on something like this whatsoever? Feel free to share this video as well so that way you can get other people in on the conversation, get other people's opinion on this idea. Maybe they have, an idea you want to hear about. So, I don't know which video will be next, because life will be quite a mess. So until next time, take care. From the Fire Guy FS, thank you for watching.